Hello again. The lecture today is on Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. I'm sure many of you have heard the expression waiting for Godot, but very few of you probably had a chance to read the text of Waiting for Godot. Waiting for Godot is a play. It would be lovely if we could have had a chance to do a play reading, which I usually do in class. I ask students to each one take a character and read it. But since you may not have a chance to buy the book, I have put also on Classroom Management the link for a PDF text, which you can download or you can just open and read it. Now, let us go a little bit to about this story. It is said to be one of the most boring books that students have read, but the more boring it is, the more it is effective in passing the message. It is written by an Irish author who is Samuel Beckett, who died in 1989. In fact, when I was a student, he was still living. And Samuel Beckett wrote this book in French. So it is called En attendant Godot. And it's interesting that the emphasis is on the attendant, which means while waiting for Godot. So he's born in Ireland, Samuel Beckett. He comes from a Protestant Anglo-Irish family. He was a student at Trinity College. And then during the war, he joined Paris, like all these people who were the existentialists like Sartre and the others. And he became very much influenced by these writings of the existential concepts that were by Sartre and Camus and others. The play is usually, it was written in 1952, and it was first performed at Théâtre Babylon in the left bank of Paris in 1953. And the first time it was performed, it is 2 acts. After the first act, there was nobody left in the audience. I think 2 or 3 people who were going to put off the lights maybe. But since then, the play En attendant Godot has been continuously performed until today. So if you go to France, if you go to Paris, if you go to Théâtre Babylon, there is always En attendant Godot being played. Now, the play is, as I said, is supposed to, basically, if you look at the back of the book, it is referred to as a tragicomedy. And it belongs to the family of writings which we call théâtre de l'absurde, the theater of the absurd. I mentioned last time when we did Sartre that absurd usually comes from the Latin surdus, which means deaf. So it is a discussion of deaf people. You know, when 2 deaf people are discussing with each other, we call this in Arabic hadith tirshan, you know. They talk and they don't communicate. And this play is a little bit like that. Now, if we go a little bit into the characters, we will find that we are a play. The setting of the play is extremely minimal. There's a tree, there's a rock, probably somewhere there's a black sky and the stars, but that's it. There are 4 important characters. These characters are dressed like the hobos, or what they call the French, the clochards, who are the people who are on the streets carrying a bottle of liquor. They wear a hat which looks like one of those New Year's Eve hats. They are torn clothes. Sleep under the bridges. They are the sort of lowest of the social class, if you want to. And there are 2 of them. One is Vladimir, who is referred to in the text as Didi, and the other is estragon, which is a name actually of a herb that you use on fish and food, and he's referred to as Gogo. So Gogo and Didi are these two clochards, these two hobos. And then you have two other characters, Pozzo, who looks like a very bourgeois character with a pipe in his mouth and a little gold watch in his jacket. And he has a leash, a rope. At the end of this rope is another human being called Lucky, who follows him everywhere upon his command. Stop, he stops. Walk, he walks. Lift bags, he lifts bags. So these four characters, and then there's a boy who's a messenger who keeps on going and coming. Now, Beckett has been referred to as a negative existentialist, as an existentialist who, like Sartre, believes that the world, the life is meaningless, there is no meaning in life. While Sartre says there is no meaning in life and it is the human being who gives meaning to life by our actions, Beckett says we attempt to give meaning to life, but it's a futile exercise, nothing to be done. And if you look at the book, the first word that starts is nothing to be done, and it ends with nothing to be done. Now, he received the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1969 for many of the books he wrote, and he is trying to show the main problems of the world we live in. So it is, as I said, the theater of the absurd, and it negates all the rules of all drama and theater. For instance, when we studied Antigone in the Greek theater, we studied that there is unity of time, unity of plot, unity of place. In other words, in classical drama or theater, you should have had the whole story unfold in the same text. You should have had the whole thing take place in the same room, and you should have had a unity of time. The story starts in the morning and ends in the evening. There isn't at the same time in Australia something happening. Now, in this story, nothing is definite. We don't know where we are. The place is somewhere, it could be anywhere. The characters, we don't know what nationality they are. The author is Irish, she writes in French. We know that somewhere it's happening in France, but then we're not very sure. We don't know what age they are. One asks the other, how old are you? He says, I'm 12 or 11 or 90. We don't know about what time is it. There is no specific concept of time. Then there are problems with language. They talk, but they don't communicate. There's a problem with memory. They don't remember. Every day they start all over again. Were we here yesterday? I don't know. Did we eat yesterday? I can't remember. And can you think that when there is no memory, how do we link our days? I think there was a film about this girl who every day started from scratch, remembering. She had no memory of what happened before. And I can't remember the name of the film, but imagine if you don't accumulate knowledge. What is experience other than actions with memory? Imagine if you don't remember your kindergarten lessons and then we have to start every day all over again. So he is trying to show the absence of logic. There is the absurd world lacks logic, and when it lacks logic, there is no causal effect. A happens, but it doesn't necessarily lead to B. And in this whole story, there is this two people waiting for Godot. Now, what is Godot? No one knows. Some people say that Godot is God, and they asked Samuel Beckett, is Godot God? He said, if I wanted to say God, I would have said God. So what is Godot? Is Godot whatever we are all waiting for? Is Godot today the end of the corona? Are we all waiting for it to end? And is this now how we look at life? We are all trapped in this middle of nonsense. Each one is trying to make sense of our lives. We try to do activities at home, a little bit like the wall. We do exercises, we sing, we dance to let the time pass. And when the time passes, actually it's time from our lives. So is it meaningful? Are we learning anything out of it? So, and then there is a kind of a split between rationality and physical existence. For example, Vladimir talks intellectual things, whereas Godot is always concerned about what are we going to eat, what are we going to do next, and so forth. So what is this tragicomedy? It is a little bit like the existence of life. Think of this world, the human condition, but there is paralysis. Nothing happens, nothing moves if you don't make it move. There is nothing moving of its own accord. There is nothing moving of its own momentum. Waiting is all that takes place. And I just want to give you an example. When you are waiting, I don't know where you are waiting in an airport, you are waiting at the cashier in Haigazian, you are waiting for at the dentist's clinic. And while you're waiting, what do? You're waiting for your girlfriend or boyfriend to come down and pick you up or whatever. What do you do when you're waiting? You're waiting, you waste time. You don't do anything constructive. You don't read an important book while you're waiting. You read a magazine. You just go and come. And so in this waiting for something to happen in our lives, how are we filling our time? I think it's a very appropriate time to read Waiting for Godot in this time for waiting for Corona to end. How are we doing? What are we doing? Some of us are doing excellent work. We're going to salvage the semester. We're going to get to graduate. We're going to... Others are saying nothing is going to happen. Don't forget about the studying. We might not even be alive to graduate. This is not the approach. So how does Sartre deal with it? How does Beckett deal with it? Sartre says life is meaningless, but man gives it meaning through action. Beckett says life is meaningless, man attempts to give it meaning, but it's a futile exercise and therefore nothing to be done. Now, many people have described this also to a Rorschach test. If you are a psychology student, you may understand what I mean. A Rorschach test is when I take a bottle of ink and throw it at the wall, and I tell you, what do you see in it? And each one of you will see what you want to see. Some of you might see a painting, some of you might see a spider, one of you might see a dirty wall. So it depends what you see. So this book is, in a way, a Rorschach test. Each one of us will look into it, what we wish and what we desire to see in it. So while waiting, what is happening in this book? The book has no society, no God, no values. There are two people, no rules, no regulations. There is no fellowship, no community. Pozzo and Lucky are acting mostly like a master and a slave. There is boredom, there is repetitiveness, there is monotony, there is the only thing that you hope that will change is hope. Maybe tomorrow will be different, so we have to go on living and doing. A bit like the Sisyphus myth. I will push the boulder again. Maybe this time things will be different. There is monotony, there is nothingness. The difference between Act 1 and Act 2 is that only it's a circular play, they're exactly the same. The only difference is that in Act 2, one of them is blind, the other is dumb, and the tree has a few leaves. So, it talks about also about how these two people, Vladimir and Estragon, how they are only two, but they are also at some point profiles of a whole community. And whereas Vladimir, Pozzo and Lucky represent also a kind of, so 4 people together are a profile of society. Now, many people will say, why didn't Beckett put a woman in this story? Having a female on stage would have changed the pattern? Would it have created action? Would it have created excitement? It is interesting to note when you read that these 2 are sexually impotent. So even they're not even finding any pleasure in libido, you know, as Freud would say. So they're sexually dead, they're socially dead, and yet they're waiting, they have hope that something is going to happen and change their lives. So they are all the time struggling to prove their existence, and at the same time they are bored, they're trying to make things different. So one of the interesting things in this play, if we ever have a chance to do things together and read it together, but if you have a chance, is to read Lucky's speech. Lucky is his, I suggest you read a few, you see a few YouTubes of the play too, because it's interesting to see this in action, or inaction as a way. The play is a circular play. As I said, there are very little differences between Act 1 or 2. Why are these people taken as the lowest of society? Because even at this lowest stage, there are some very interesting human rights statements that are expressed. Even if you are the lowest of the humans, you are not animals. And there are certain things that they are shocked at. For example, when they see Pozzo, the way he treats Lucky, Vladimir says, it's a scandal. You cannot treat a human being like this. And yet they are very, very far from normal human beings. And yet there is a kind of dignity in them in the way they respond. There is also a kind of approach in the sense that they are all tied together, that people cannot live alone. For instance, at one point, one of them sleeps, and the other one goes and wakes him up and says, why didn't you let me sleep? He said, I got bored. Without you, I'm alone, you know. So this need of companionship, the need of friendship. There's also the importance of, for instance, this waiting for this person to come. And then it's interesting that they're not very clear about this Godot. So he says, one of them says, why did we, what are we waiting for? He says, we're waiting for Godot. And he says, okay, what did we ask him? He says, I'm not sure, I don't remember. But he said that he will help us. He says, but help us in what? What did we want? He says, oh, I don't know, he will help us in everything. And he said, are you sure he said he's going to come? He said, yes, he said he will come on Saturday. But he said, what Saturday was it? Was it this Saturday, or next Saturday, or the Saturday after? He says, oh, don't make it difficult for me, he's coming. And then he says, let's go. He says, we can't go. He says, why? We are committed, we are tired, we have to wait for Godot. So what is this thing that we have as an aim in life that motivates us to act, to do things, although we don't know what it is? We're not very sure about it. And yet, without it, we would be nothing. It is that which keeps us moving, keeps us going, and keeps us going further. Now, I mentioned Lucky's speech. Lucky's speech is very interesting because it's about 4 pages of total nonsense. And the way it is read, it is in a way where Beckett is making fun of people like us, university teachers, and intellectuals, or politicians, or people who are on TV today, who speak and speak and speak and speak, and yet when you ask them, what did they say? You find that they haven't said anything. It's only a lot of clutter and sound and a lot of sounds put together. And at the beginning, he says a few words, and then he keeps on saying, for reasons uncertain. So nothing is certain, nothing is clear, nothing is absolute, no cause and effect. He takes a word and he goes quack, 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 and then he says another word, and then he says sports, and he goes tennis and the golf and the rocket. So in fact, total, utter nonsense. and it is a person who only speaks when you tell him think. So it is imagine that you can give any command to a human being, but how can you say to a human being, think or stop thinking? So these are some of the themes that are in the text. There are very many, and I'm really sad that we're not going to, but next time we get together and do this, not Tuesday, but Thursday, we'll try to go through the text and read it a little bit together and find out a little bit some of this nonsense that is supposed to be life and out of which we're supposed to make sense. Thank you.